ジョンは残念ながら亡くなってるわけですけど、ジョンっていうのはどういう人だったんですか？
He was a very warm, generous family man. His family was really, really important to him. Pretty much like most of us, we would go on the road and there'd be this, you can imagine if you play at that intensity for both him, myself or whatever for 3 hours, and it's not just like a little tap of adrenaline, it's like the floodgates of adrenaline, and it was difficult to sleep after concerts, and it was on a roller coaster, on touring, which could almost be slightly mad, but you can understand with the intensity of that playing, and he enjoyed what was so important to him, the balance of being on the road to being at home with his family. That was so precious and dear to him. But sometimes he got homesick on the road, and a lot of time he was homesick because he really loved his family, But as I say, he was a very warm and generous man. Yeah.
フォロートラブとかそういう長いジャムをメンバーの中でインプロビゼーションで発展させていくとき、あれの続け方とか終わり方っていうのはメンバーが目で合図してたんですか、それとももうフィーリングでどんどんやってたんですか？
Well, yes, there was a lot of eye contact, and the thing is that it was everyone was aware. You could see out the corner of your eye too, But you see, Dazed and Confused is got lots of different movements. It's like a classical construction as far as that goes. So the movements extend, but there'll be a cue to go into the next part. So that's what it was basically. There'd be whole areas where you could stretch and improvise. Maybe new riffs would come up, whatever. But then there would be the cue to go into the next section. And then it would keep moving on, maybe more improvisation, maybe not. It just depended on how it was in the evening, Sometimes one number would overstretch, and sometimes the next night it wouldn't. There was no rule because it was real. It was total spontaneity. There were obvious cues, but the reality of it was you could never be absolutely certain what was going to happen each night, because when you go on stage, everything of the day is behind you. All it is important, once the instrument goes on, then it's just communication musically.
僕は実はネイバース見に行った人間なんですけども、僕見に行った日の前座はたくさん出ましたけど、キース・リチャーズ、ローリング・ストーンズのキース・リチャーズはニュー・バーバリアンズが前座で出てました。だけど何がすごかったかって、レゼッペリン出てくるのはすんごい遅かったんですけども、誰一人文句言わないで野原をうずめ尽くした20数万人のファンがずっと待ってたのがとても印象的だったんですけど、ジミーはステージの上から20数万人、丘の先まで行った人を見てどう思いました？
Well, I came in by helicopter because of the roads. You couldn't be relied upon to get in by road. This figure of 230,000, I don't know about that. Because what I do know is that the promoter said it was so many people, and Peter Grant didn't believe it because he knew what an audience looked like, because we played to, I don't know, 50,000, 60,000 in America, and you could see what that looked like. And we took a photograph of it, and he counted all the heads, because it came out to more like 400,000 people, but the promoter didn't want to pay, you see. One of the things, what did it look like? Well, it was astonishing, because it just said to us, these are your fans. They're all here to hear you after this troubled time for Robert especially, And I must say that wherever we went, from 1968 to 1980, there were always more people every time that we went to play. And one last thing I wanted to say about Nebworth is that even though we hadn't played for a while, you can actually see with the Nebworth footage, just how happy we are to be playing again. We're just lost in it. You know, you may have waited 3 hours for us to go on. We probably played for about maybe 3 hours again, but we were just so happy to be playing again. It was good.
そのネブアスの時にジミーのソロの時に頭上から緑のレーザー光線がバーッとこう降り注ぎました、スクリーンをステージで使ったのも本当にねヨーロッパのバンドで多分世界のバンドでもツェッペリンが一番最初だったかもしれません。そういう新しい技術をどんどんステージに持ち込んでいったのはジミーのアイデアだったんですか？
Yeah, we were always right at the forefront of technology. The curious thing is that the funny story is that when we did Earl's Court, yes, it was the first time in Europe that they'd ever had projection, first time, you know. But we also had a laser. Well, you're talking about the ones by the time, it's like the projection and the lasers by the time they got to Nebworth were very sophisticated. But the difference is that we had a laser that we brought over from America. And I remember now there was a terrible fuss with the council, the London Council, and they didn't want us to use the laser. And in the end they did, and I tell you that all the laser was, you know these little laser pens with like a little one red beam? That's what it was, but it was a big machine to make this little beam that just went around, but it was, it's a laser, you know, and in fact it was rubbish. but at the time everyone go, oh look, it's a laser, and it's just this little thing, you know, it's mad. No, but it did get developed, of course, but yeah, I mean, we'd even do, that's right, we had lasers, the same as everybody else, one little bit. But it was developed into this, you know, during Dazed and Confused, whatever, you know, the bow anyway, this big pyramid that used to sort of spin and move, and that was good stuff, yeah. I enjoyed that.
ジミーとロバートとジョン・ポールとジョンが4人集まった時にあなたはどういう方向でこのニューグループを進めていこうかと考えていたそうですね。一つはそのブリティッシュフォークの方向に行こうか、それともハードなブルースに行こうかと。で結局ハードなブルースの方向に選択してレッド・ゼッペリン成功したわけです。もしあの時フォークの方向に進路を取っていったらレッド・ゼッペリンの運命は違う方向に行ってたと思いますか？
That was never the intention was never just one thing or the other. My musical influences had come from many areas, which made me as a musician, in so much as doing, because of that, because of the music that I'd accessed, and not just one thing. Like Eric is a blues player, Jimmy's not a blues player. Well, I am, but not to the same, that was not my only like that. Jeff Beck is a soloist. I always thought more of the group. You see, so there's different ways of looking at it, but I must say that as far as the days of studio work, I did all manner of things. I played jazz, I played folk, folk music there, I played harmonica, I did all manner of things. But when it came to Led Zeppelin, my roots as far as Chicago music with riffs of the 50s and rockabilly music, rock bands like Little Richard, the folk music that I'd been into of the sort of 60s, the English players that were very much into the Charlie Mingus, the soul players, you know, like Davy Graham and Burt Younts, they took from there. The world music that I'd been in, that I'd managed to access. Of course, as maybe over the last 20 years, I accessed a lot more than I did in those days. But nevertheless, my finger was on the pulse across the whole musical spectrum. And of course, because it was all coming into me, it was like my diet was that music. It came out as my playing and my writing within the group.